My name's Ian Ginn. I'm the host of Digital Talk, and today I've got with me Steffen Kirchgeorg from Namu Robotics, who I met at the AI for Good Summit in Geneva, which happened beginning of July. On Digital Talk, we spotlight entrepreneurs, leaders, and innovators using digital tech and telecoms to drive global impact in a changing world. Uncovering the unexpected, spotlighting hidden gems, and sharing inspiring stories that shine a light on the most transformative corners of our industry. Welcome to the podcast, Steffen.
Hello, and thanks for having me. I'm Steffen Kirchgeorg from Namu Robotics, and I'm excited to chat with you on AI for good.
Perfect. Can you tell us a little bit more about Namu and where you guys came from and what sort of projects you're working on?
Yeah, so my background is actually in aerospace mechanical engineering. I just finished my PhD at ETH Zürich, looking at environmental robotics. So how can we use robots and specifically drones for environmental monitoring? And that's where the idea of Namu Robotics came up, where we want to leverage novel technology, specifically drones and kind of drone-like systems to collect environmental data from the rainforest, but in general also from other environmental systems. This can be in agriculture as well.
So I was at this show and I saw that you basically were flying drones, and I think you had a probe off the bottom of the drone, which was then sort of being inserted into the forest.
Sure. So what we have, and this I have together with my colleague Christian, we've prototyped this over the course of our PhDs and also now continue to do that. We've built a system that allows us to collect environmental samples from within the rainforest. So we have a enterprise drone that we use that hovers above the rainforest, and we added a payload that allows us to deploy a probe down even 40 meters into the canopy, basically to the ground. And as it moves down into the vegetation, you can imagine there's a kind of disc attached to this probe, and it's brushing against leaves, against the vegetation, against the branches. And it's actually collecting genetic material from the organisms that live in this environment. And we then retract this probe and bring the drone back. And then we take this sample, and our colleagues can then analyze this for the environmental DNA, so the genetic material of these organisms, and we can actually match that with a database and find out what biodiversity, what species are living in this habitat. This was really a collaborative effort that we've developed during my PhD and during my colleague's PhD. And it's really cool that we were able to test this in the Amazon rainforest last year. We're participating in a global challenge, the X Prize Rainforest competition, and really demonstrating this technology in the middle of nowhere in the Amazon.
That is an amazing and laudable project. I can sort of imagine how it helps in the sense of trying to find species. Where are those species? And therefore, once we, of course, have gathered knowledge, we can actually maybe do something with that knowledge, I guess, is the fundamentals of that.
Today's episode is sponsored by IFG Consulting Europe, who help operators to tap into technologies to accelerate digitization of the network, drive revenues, and reduce costs by championing promising software providers in telecoms, enterprise, and mobile markets. Go to ifgconsultingeurope.com to find out more.
So what was the experience then? You said it was great last year. Were you able to find new species, or how were you able to, find things there?
That's a great question. Actually, it's interesting because we really know not that much about the species in the Amazon. There's also local communities that we interacted with, and they know this much better than us Westerners, let's say. But of course, they have maybe their own names, and maybe there's been also species that are not yet recorded scientifically. So basically, we actually got around 400 sequences of DNA, and only a really small fraction of that we could match with the database. So for sure, there were species there that at least we don't have the DNA somewhere sequenced and stored in a database that we could match up against. Now, for us, it's difficult because now we can't say what was the species that we basically found the DNA from. So there's still some work to be needed to do on the ground, not just, flying our drones. So we really need to work together with people on the ground, with scientists in these areas to still also build up this catalog and build up this reference database. But what our technology will allow us is to rapidly go through these environments and be able to, do a benchmark and see what is there. And is this forest, vital? Is this forest important to protect? Or also, if we are restoring forests, for example, how well are we restoring towards a set goal, towards, the untouched primary rainforest? So for this, we were really trying to push this technology forward.
And was access a problem as well? I'm just thinking of going into the middle of the rainforests is not a trivial exercise.
Absolutely. That was the whole point of using drones, actually using robotics for this competition. Even there, we also struggled with access because, as you maybe can imagine, you're trying to fly a drone very far away from yourself, and there's massive vegetation in front of you if you're on the ground. And that also means that basically all your communication signal needs to penetrate through that vegetation. So we really struggled with that aspect of communication to bridge the gap to also this field, because really we don't yet have all the technology that allows us to operate these drones, anywhere. Of course, we could put, a Starlink on the drone and possibly fly it completely autonomously. Sure, we've done that as well, but still being able to get a reliable signal in the middle of the Amazon rainforest from a device that is a few kilometers away, that's really still a big challenge.
So can I ask what sort of technology you used? I'm thinking of, this podcast is related to communications as such. So can you share with us that?
So for our project, we needed a reliable platform. So we used a DJI Metris 300 enterprise drone that is using 2.4 and 5 gigahertz, basically Wi-Fi. And that usually allows a few hundred meters of penetration through dense vegetation. Of course, this highly depends what, if it's moist, if it's how dense it is and so on. And in line of sight, we can, of course, operate much further, 7 kilometers.
So what next for yourselves with the project? Are you going back out there? How are you getting funding? How's the next sort of high-level plan?
Currently, we're looking so we started with our technology for biodiversity monitoring. And while we see that there's an interest, it's still difficult because most of this would then be through philanthropic money. Because at the moment, it's hard to find really to kind of monetize nature and biodiversity. What we're currently also looking at more in Europe is invasive pest detection. So we're looking at the Japanese beetle. It's currently a big problem in Switzerland and Italy. I'm moving north to Germany, but I think also in first sightings in the UK. So it's spreading from Italy towards everywhere. And it's a pest that is really eating mainly vines, but actually has over 400 host plants that it likes to feed on. And the authorities are very concerned. So this is what we're currently trying to tackle, to really detect this pest at an early stage, survey large areas of agricultural land, but also grasslands and so on, where they really lay their eggs and where they originate from then.
And would you be using the same technique there with a probe, or would you use something?
Exactly. So in the rainforest, we sample vertically. So we lower this probe vertically. And for the agricultural land and the grasslands and so on, we use a horizontal method. So we swap basically the vegetation horizontally. We drag this probe through the grass, through the field. And we can then, again, do the same or a similar analysis, actually a slightly easier and faster analysis, because we know the target organism and we just are looking for this, the DNA of this organism. So then we can also speed up the analysis.
When you say analysis, are you guys using any AI at the moment, or do you envisage using AI going forward?
Yeah, great question. So the analysis part is still what our colleagues are doing. It's mainly a lot of laboratory work because it's really genetic analysis. Then downstream, when we're talking about biodiversity monitoring, there is still a lot of bioinformatics. So that's where AI can come into play. For our part, where we're working with robotics, for us, it's interesting to leverage, I think, a few different aspects of AI. So clearly we can use segmentation algorithms and perception algorithms to basically know where it's best to sample. Also trying to infer already from either previous remote sensing data, so satellite imagery, or just like by flying over the forest and trying to infer where is a suitable sampling site, what is most where we would achieve the highest kind of yield, let's say. This is at the moment of course, a very difficult topic because usually when you look from above, it just all looks the same. But maybe an AI can make sense of this, right? And allow us to make more informed approaches for sampling.
That's good to hear. And what was the reason why you went to the ITU AI for Good Summit? What were you expecting to achieve there?
Yeah, for me, I think the whole concept of AI for good is really cool. I think we need to leverage this new technology for the good, and I was hoping to see a little bit more, to be honest. And there was a few cool projects that I've also heard of before, like the wild drone one that I haven't met in person before. But I was also a bit surprised. There's still a lot of traditional kind of robotics, and more like, yeah, I guess everyone has their own definition of for good. And for me, it's really like looking at nature, looking at combating climate change. And this I would have really liked to see more of.
No, I appreciate that. And I'm sure next year, well, hopefully with people listening to the podcast, it'll inspire some other people to apply and be at the event as well. So other than this great work that you're doing, what do you think is the sort of society's main sort of pressing issue that people should be looking at and tackling?
Well, I think I'm a bit biased in this. I mean, since I've worked on environmental robotics, for me, it's climate change. I mean, we've mostly looked at, biodiversity decline, biodiversity loss, and how we can monitor this. But I think on the other side, we should really look at climate change. And yeah, I think here in the Alps or in Switzerland, at least we have just saw another statistics and we're probably already beyond we are at the 2 degrees of warming here in Switzerland. And you can feel it every summer, right? And as I'm also an avid snowboarder and love the mountains, I also see, the glaciers melting away under us. So yeah, that's something that's really dear to my heart.
I totally get it in the sense of you can see it. In Switzerland's a real place, glaciers, less snow, whatever, change of environment is tangible. It's very tangible. I know it is another place in the world, but I mean, literally, as you see, this glacier is, shrinking back. It's very obvious. So.
Absolutely, yeah. I've been to a few places in Switzerland. I mean, one remarkable one in France is in Chamonix, for example, is Mer de Glace. And I can just recommend everyone who's somehow visiting or in the area, like go there. It's shocking and you will, it puts what we do on an everyday basis, I think, into a bit of a perspective because within 50, 60 years, this glacier has receded so far. And this is just one example. I mean, there's plenty of places in the Alps.
Agreed. But coming back to that, we need to leave a generation in good shape. And one of the things that I picked up at the AI for Good Summit was they made the comment of the young people of today are already living in an AI society in that sense. Have you got any suggestions for any budding entrepreneurs who want to use AI going forward, what they should be doing?
Oh, that's a very, very good and difficult question, I think. I think we need to focus more on each other, on the society as a whole, and trying to, build connections and trying to build solutions that really are impactful. And with impactful, I mean, they're good for the planet and the people. And I think AI can help us really build something impactful, but we also have to be cautious, right? We shouldn't just blindly follow, um, you know, maybe also the big players that are advertising and that are probably making a lot of money on AI, but try to build our own things on top of or using, existing technology or innovating on the technology to build really, things that can also do good.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. We do like to give our guests the opportunity to do good on the show by giving a shout out to someone or an institution, whatever you'd like. Have you got someone in mind that you'd like to give a shout out to?
Yeah, sure. So, besides my colleague that I've mentioned, Christian Geckler, I've worked with him for a long time, and thanks for that. But I want to also give a shout out to Rainforest, David Dow. He has done a tremendous work. We've worked together on, this whole technology of biodiversity monitoring in the Amazon rainforest, and he has been working together with local communities, local and indigenous communities in this area, and it's really, really crazy to see his motivation and what he does on a daily basis. He's really, really inspirational. So, shout out to David Dow and Gainforest.
Well, thank you very much for that. Thank you very much for joining the podcast. Sorry we weren't able to actually record it at the event, but I think this has gone well. And I wish you all success with the project and Namu Robotics. Yes, stay in touch and stay tuned.
Thanks a lot, Ian. Ciao.
If you've enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to rate us and subscribe, and feel free to follow us on LinkedIn. And if you have comments or ideas for future episodes, please send us an email. Thanks for being part of the Digital Talk community and for listening. Stay tuned.